Hey Hearties, you're listening to the Hearties Hotline, your connection to Hope Valley, hosted by me, Casey, and my friends Caroline and Cammie. A special thanks goes to our friend Brian Bird for letting us use the music on our show. Without further ado, grab a scone from Abigail's and enjoy. Welcome back, Hearties. Have we got a treat for you today? We have here with us the man himself, Mr. Brian Papa Hardy Bird. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be with you guys. Glad to be on your show, and always enjoy looking out into cyberspace at all my Hardy friends. So I'm happy to be with you.
Well, it is a privilege and an honor, sir. Thank you so much.
You bet. You bet. Well, I mean, what else are we going to do? We're all stuck in our homes right now. So.
Very true. Very true.
It's Groundhog Day for me. So this is a new wrinkle in my life here today, to be with you guys. So awesome.
All right. Well, to get started, we're going to ask you a little bit about your general background. So in media. So Caroline, take it away.
What inspired your love for media?
Well, I guess there's a couple ways to answer that. My dad, Robert Bird, who passed on and graduated to heaven about 10 years ago, actually, was a disc jockey for radio when I was growing up. So I grew up with my dad being, on the radio all the time. And so I was exposed to sort of the media that way. And then when I was a freshman in high school, I had an English teacher, Mrs. Stevens, who held me after class one day. And she told me to stay after, and all my friends, when the bell rang, they were walking out of the class looking back at me with like, oh, you're busted, dude. What did you do? And so I kind of, got up and shuffled slowly to the desk up front and wondering, what I did wrong. And she held up an essay that I had written for me, and it had an A+ on it. And she said she wanted to enter that in an essay contest. And I was like, so, relieved that I go, oh yeah, whatever. I'm not in trouble. That, everything else is great. Do whatever you want. And, but she looked me right in the eye and she said to me, you could do this for a living if you want to. And, I had never heard anything like that before. Writing had always, come a little easier than other things to me. Everything was sort of hard, but writing, I guess I had a facility for it. And, my parents loved me. They were proud of me, but they, I don't know if any of you guys are parents, but I am. And, we're proud of everything our children do. We get a lot of praise just for taking a little duty in the toilet for the first time.
Yes.
So that's a really low bar, right? A really low bar for achievement and praise. So, my parents loved me, but they didn't really know what I was good at. But it took that adult champion, Mrs. Stevens, in my life to like point out something to me that was, was a surprising thing. And, every child needs champions like that in their lives. I really believe that's honestly, part of Mrs. Thatcher Thornton in Hope Valley is all about lighting fires under children and raising up a generation of young citizens to go out into the world and change the world with their gifts. And every child needs adult champions, and so that's a big theme for me in my life. And that was my first sort of champion who was an outside objective observer who could, point to something in my life and say, you need to do more of that. And there were other champions who kind of came into my life at various points as well. Mrs. Stevens dogged me all the way through high school. She got me onto the school newspaper. I became the managing editor when I was a senior in high school. I had my own column where I was like mixing it up, muckraking, doing, opinion pieces about the school and, the bad food in the cafeteria. And I was making a name for myself that way. But then she said, Brian, after, you get out, after you graduate, you need to go to journalism school. And so I just kept saying yes to her. Right. And I think, I think it's a really good lesson for everybody. When somebody speaks truth into you, say yes to that truth. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know how it's going to work, but say yes when somebody speaks truth into your life. And so that, I was trained as a journalist. I first learned how to write, writing for newspapers and magazines. I did that for the first several years of my professional life, my professional career. So I really learned how to write doing that and doing journalistic work. And when you do that, when you're writing on deadline, because the newspaper's coming out tomorrow, there's no such thing as being late on a deadline, right? You have to hit those deadlines. All the pressure that is put on you, well, it sharpens your tools and it sharpens your skills. And honestly, when I morphed into film and television, I did it really with no fear because I was already comfortable at the keyboard. There was nothing intimidating about that part of it. And so it was really just about learning, kind of teaching myself, how to write scripts. That was all homework. I didn't go to film school. My film school was the film school of reading really good screenplays. Right. So getting my hands on like produced screenplays and teleplays for television, screenplays for, the movies. And by just loading up on those things, by reading, absorbing, I was able to teach myself. The format is not the hard thing. The hard thing is the content, obviously, is how to, write dramatically or humorously. Those are things that you have to learn. But the format was, was a snap to pick up. That was the easy part. So anyway, I went to my own film school because I had already gone to journalism school, and I just taught myself how to do it that way. My first break in television came through pure nepotism. My wife's, Patty, her great uncle was a film and TV writer going all the way back to the golden years of TV, the golden age. All the great Westerns, the Rifleman, Have Gun Will Travel, Bonanza, the Big Valley, the Virginian. He wrote for Star Trek, the original Star Trek show.
Wow.
So he had, this was a guy who was very successful. Well, my wife, after we were married, we were at a family get together, and she cornered him.
Dear.
And said, Uncle Don, you need to read my husband's, newspaper work, his news clippings. And, whether he was, guilted into it or just a good guy, probably a little of both, he said, sure, I'll read your husband's work. And so he did. And he got back to me. He said, I started out as a journalist too. He said, you have strong writing skills. Have you ever thought about film and television? And I said, I've always been a consumer. I've always consumed all my life. As a child, I just loved going to the movies with my dad and having the wonder, of the universe opened up to me that way, and the wonder of story. And so I was always a consumer, but I had never thought about what it would be like to write. And so he said, well, you should give it a shot. And he said, and at that time he was working for a show, writing and producing a show that you guys are way too young to remember what it is, but it was called Fantasy Island. And it was back in the 1980s.
I've heard the name.
Yeah. So it was a big hit on ABC in the 1980s. And he was a writer producer. And so he gave me some scripts for, sample scripts from the show that they had shot. And he said, just, read these. He gave me a couple of books, kind of primer type books on, screenwriting and dramatic writing and so forth. And he said, just do some homework and see what you can do. And so I wrote what's called a spec episode of Fantasy Island. A spec means you just take your best shot at their show. You create it's like fan fiction, what you might call fan fiction now, but I wrote my own episode of that show, and I presented that to him, and he goes, you know what, this is a really good sample for you. He said, we can't do anything with this because we have a firewall up around, and all shows do, by the way,
right?
A legal firewall again, around the show, so that you can't really take submissions from over the transom.
Right.
The only way you can actually, get new content from freelance writers is to say, come and pitch something to us. And if we like something, we'll give you a shot at writing an episode. So my episode was just a really good spec for them, which showed them that I had some chops. And they said, if we get picked up for an 8th season, come in, we'll have you come in and you can pitch us some ideas. And so, they did get picked up for an 8th season. This was 1984. I think I was 25 years old, 26 years old. And he called me up and he said, bring some ideas in. So I took some time to come up with a few ideas for the show. I think 4 concepts, maybe a half a page each, just kind of beat them out, half a page each. And I went in and I pitched these 4 ideas to them, and they said, you know what, we like that one. And who's your agent? And I said, my wife. I don't know. And so Uncle Don said, look, don't worry about it. I'll get my agent to represent you on this. But they hired me at that point, to write an episode of Fantasy Island. And I took a week of vacation. I went off and wrote an outline. I brought the outline in. They gave me some notes. I took another week of vacation to write the script, and I brought that in. And they said, you know what, this is good. We're going to shoot this. In case you had crashed and burned on this, it was no problem. We had another backup script waiting, so you wouldn't have hung us out to dry. And I'm so glad they didn't tell me that ahead of time.
Yeah.
I would have crashed and burned. I would have felt so much pressure that I would have just totally fallen apart. And so anyway, I had my first episode, my first cup of coffee in the big leagues on ABC television. 20 million people watched that show back in the day. And it was the 3rd to last episode that ever aired of Fantasy Island, because they literally got canceled after that season. So I just squeaked in under the door there and got my first cup of coffee in the big leagues. And it was so much fun that I told my wife, I said, the show it's getting canceled, but I have to continue trying to pursue this. And also, I'll just say, the check that I got for writing that episode of network television was half of what I made every year.
Wow.
In my journalism job. And, when you're young, father and husband, we had our first son was born at that point. You go, okay, well, I really do need to follow up on this
Oh.
and pursue it. And then the show got canceled, and Uncle Don sort of went into semi-retirement. And so my hookup, my way in the door sort of closed down on me for a while. And I continued my journalism work. And 3 years later, I was in Ethiopia, covering the famine there of the 1980s for a magazine article. And I was in the hotel room in Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. And I was flipping around the television in the hotel room. And guess what I saw?
What?
Not only Fantasy Island, but
your episode.
My episode of Fantasy Island in Ethiopia.
Oh,
wow.
my gosh.
It was translated, it had Amharic subtitles on it. And
oh my goodness.
And it had been 3 years since that had been on TV in America. And I got some perspective in those 3 years. It's like, well, one episode of TV is kind of, who cares really? I mean, in the scope of the universe, it's a tiny grain of sand. But when I saw it in Ethiopia translated like that into Amharic, it was a crystal moment for me. And I had been raised in the church, and my grandfather was a pastor, and I grew up in church, and I sort of had this crystal moment that was like, okay, well, if Fantasy Island can be exported all over the world like this, that the opportunity for life and faith affirming kind of content is also there, right? It's also
Absolutely.
there. And so I just kind of had a crystal moment, an epiphany. And I just said, God, if you want me back in that work, open another door. And a year later, I was on my as a writer on a staff writer on my first television show, which was a sitcom on CBS. It was 1989-90 season. And I was a story editor on my first sitcom, and I went in, that was a full dive into that work. Not just a freelancer, but I was on staff full time of a network show. And that on that same writing staff is where I met Martha Williamson. She was a supervising producer of The Family Man, and that's where I got to know Martha. And years later, probably 8 years later from that season, is when I began working for her on Touched by an Angel. So, so it's a long answer to your question.
All right.
There's a journey. There's a hero's journey. I'm no hero, but I had my own hero's journey in that sort of pursuit of this business. And from that point on, from 1989-90, I've never looked back. I have worked consistently. It doesn't mean it was always a feast. Sometimes there's famine in the middle, of these, these seasons of media work. But that has been so since 1990, essentially for the last 30 years, I've been working exclusively in film and television. Cool. Every once in a while, I'll do some journalism, but just more because I have things that I want to say and get them published in that way. But so, but I still see myself as a journalist in my work because I attack every project like I'm a journalist, even if it's fiction, right? Because you're world building. When you write fiction, you're world building, you're terraforming. And that requires research. That requires drilling down into to sort of figure out how to make it real, So anyway, there's my answer to that question.
I beg to differ. I think you're a hero.
Thank you.
Well, Cammie and I, we are aspiring writers. We like writing for fun and for hobby. Would love to write a book type of thing. We were actually talking to our friend Rachel Fordham, who wrote a book called Yours Truly Thomas, and about writing, and we were just soaking it all up. So this is just fantastic and so inspiring.
Well, I think for you guys, look, you know, this desire that you have is not God teasing you with it, right? If it's truly something that lights your jets, if you go to bed at night and you're lying awake at night thinking about this, thinking about a story, thinking about something that you want to write, if you wake up in the morning and you're motivated, you know, this is not God teasing you with dangling something in front of your face and saying, ah, ha, ha, I'm going to take that away. Right? So I said yes to Mrs. Stevens, and I said yes to Uncle Don, right? He was another mentor that I had. And when you have adult champions speak into your life, and I'm more of an adult than any of you, so I can speak into your life right now. You have to say yes. You just have to say yes to those desires. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean you're going to be like an overnight sensation. It's hard work. It's competitive. You have to compete with really good people out there, and you have to be better than them. You actually have to learn to be better than they are. You actually have to learn to work them under the table. If they're going to stay till 9, you stay long. You say, I'm going to stay till 10 then. You're not going to work longer than me. I'm going to work longer than you. And I'll be here earlier than you. You know, that's the kind of attitude that you have to take. And I believe that we're all made in the image of the author of the universe. One of my you know, my experiences with writing, with writer's block, came on a Touched by an Angel episode.
Oh dear.
And I don't think Martha's ever heard this story.
This is good.
I was writing an episode of Touched by an Angel. It was probably the year 2000, maybe. And it was due the next day. And I had written myself, you know, figuratively into a tributary of the Amazon River, of the rainforest. And I couldn't find my way back to the main channel. I had written myself into a corner, and I was getting desperate, because in television, very much like in journalism, there's no such thing as writer's block. It's not allowed. It's not allowed.
Right.
It's not allowed. Right. Now, if you're working on your own book and you don't have a deadline looming, you know, then you can go through that process. But in television, there's no such thing as calling them up the next day. You know, I'm not just feeling it right now, so I'm gonna probably need a couple more days to get this work. And you know, the crew is okay with that, because they're gonna get paid. They're gonna get paid for sitting around eating chips and cupcakes. If they're not working, they still get paid. So the clock, you know, you're burning $100,000 a day on the crew, right? So there's no such thing as saying I'm going to be late. So I was desperate. I was sweating it, and I prayed. I just said, God, help. What do I do? And you know, I didn't hear a voice. Words didn't start typing magically on the screen, right? Typing themselves on the screen. But I had a deep soul impression. And this is the soul impression I had. I was a writer. Now you be one.
Oh.
And it was like I got chill bumps, because it's like, wait, what does that mean? Right? And then all these kind of truths from, you know, my upbringing, from church, from, you know, the Bible, sort of came to me, and I you know, these verses kind of came to mind, like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was not written on tablets of stone, but on hearts of flesh. Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
God, the author of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
How did heaven choose to leave us this revelation in a big fat novel?
Oh my
Right?
goodness.
Yeah, that's true.
Never thought of it that way.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did God create the world? He spoke it
Mm-hmm.
into existence.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Let there be light." He spoke the words and it happened. He has always been an author. He's always been a communicator. He's a writer before he's anything,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if
Absolutely.
if I'm made in his image, as you guys are,
Mm-hmm.
if we're made in the image of the author of all things,
Oh.
then we have a tiny strand of that DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We have a tiny strand of that creative DNA. Doesn't mean I'm saying we're gods. I'm
Right.
saying that we're made in the image of God, like we're told. And if we have that strand and we're authors, we're in the legacy. We're legacy people, right? But we all human beings have some strand of the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
If we're made in the image of the author of the universe. So whether we're painters or sculptors or architects or mathematicians or scientists or surgeons or, whatever our gifting, wherever our gifting is, if we're made in the image of the author of the universe, we're supposed to become the Michelangelo of that one strand of DNA or die trying.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't mean we're all going to get there. Doesn't mean we're all going to be Michelangelos, but we're supposed to try. We're supposed to try to do that, right? Because anything short of that, anything short of trying to be Michelangelo, we're selling ourselves short. We're selling the world short because the world is supposed to get that gifting, right? We're supposed to offer that gifting. Not for our own glory, but to reflect praise back to the Creator. And selling ourselves short, the world short, and we're selling our Maker short. If we don't choose, seek, say yes to the strand of DNA.
Yeah.
Right?
That's me. Amen. It's like the parable of the talents, when he didn't use it and he didn't invest, he was not blessed. So it's the same concept. That is absolutely 100%,
Right. And how much better would the world be if all of us said yes to the DNA? Whatever that looks like in our lives, right?
Yeah.
We'd tear the world up in a good way. We would make a wreck out of everything in a good wreck, a good mess. We would do it, make a great mess everywhere with our DNA. And so anyway, hopefully that's encouraging to you guys as you're pursuing your DNA.
Incredibly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was
cry.
Giving chills.
Oh man.
Well, I wouldn't be as forceful about this if I wasn't right about it. But I am absolutely right about this. I know this to be the truth.
Yes.
You've been through it.
I've been through it, but it's also, an epiphany that has come over time to me.
Yes.
It's become crystal clear to me that this is a message that everybody needs. Doesn't matter if you're a writer or not. Everybody needs to be a yes person, right? We need to say way more yeses than nos in our life.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Okay, what's next? Oh, right. Next question.
That was so good. That was so
That was
amazing.
good.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So you've done a lot of modern stories, and you've also done a lot of historical plot lines. Do you find that you have a preference for either, or do you just love both of them equally? Because you've done some amazing work in both.
Well, thank you. It's hard for me to have a favorite because I have 5 kids, and if you ask me who my favorite kid is, how am I going to say? I don't. They're all my favorite. They're all my favorite. They all bless me in different ways. So, I love history. Obviously, I love what we can learn from history. I don't want to cancel history as opposed to what some people are doing these days, because we need to learn from it. If there were mistakes, let's learn from those mistakes. Let's figure out how to be better by learning from those mistakes. But I like redeeming stories too. I like redeeming history. I like redeeming people. I love telling true stories also. I love, maybe that's the journalism side of me, because that's how you get trained, is, digging into true stories, real life, and trying to make those clear to people. So I love redemptive true stories. Many of the projects that I have worked on or am working on as we speak are redeeming true stories. They're taking, true life people through a crucible and then getting them out on the other end, having learned, and it's really the hero's journey is all in it, right? The hero's journey is in every story that we tell.
Right.
Even in journalism, we look for ways to conform true stories into the hero's journey, the stages of the hero's journey. So I just love story. I just love story. And story, whether it's true or fiction, fictional stories are still based on truth somewhere. Like, when somebody writes a fictional story, even if it's science fiction, it's still based on their understanding of the human condition,
Right.
on what real people go through, life lessons that we've learned. So, fiction to me is, honestly, I'll still be a journalist on fictional stories. So I just love story, because story is food. Story is food, right? What do I don't know if any of you guys are parents, but
2 of us are. I am, and Casey is.
Okay. Well, what do your kids say when you're putting them to bed at night?
Night,
what do they
Mommy,
want?
I love you.
Yeah. And
I want ice water.
I want ice water. Well, lots of kids say, tell me a story.
Yeah.
Right? Now, sometimes they're stalling because they don't want to go to sleep. But I do think that kids from the beginning of the human race have asked their parents to tell them a story when they go to bed, right? Whether they read them a story or tell them a story. Even the cave children, right? Ask the cave daddy or the cave mommy, tell me a story. All those pictographs on the cave walls that have been discovered from, the caveman days.
Yep.
I'm convinced that it was because some cave kid said, tell me a story. And so they put her on the wall. They put her on the wall so the kid can look at that and go to sleep without them having to tell them a story every night. I really believe this. Story is food. The hero's journey goes back 4,000 years. We're all wired in our souls with violin strings. Picture that. We all have violin strings running through our souls, and those violin strings are tuned to themes, right? Courage, nobility, loyalty, community, sacrifice, forgiveness, redemption, resurrection. There's probably dozens more themes that you could list. How come those themes keep getting plucked in every story we look at? Any story we look at, any movie, any book we read, any fictional story, the same journey is told in every one. And usually, guess what? The hero's journey that has been identified by Joseph Campbell in his work, his study of all the great myths of all of human history. It's called A Hero with a Thousand Faces, is his book, right?
I've heard of it.
It describes the hero's journey. And guess what? Those stages are the same in all the myths. Did you know that in the epic poem of Gilgamesh from ancient Samaria, 2,000 years before Jesus, Gilgamesh dies and is resurrected in that epic story, right?
I'd forgotten
2,000 years later, Jesus is resurrected. I'm not saying that Jesus was a myth, but C.S. Lewis said Jesus was the myth that became true, because all of human history is filled with stories like the Jesus story. It's because man is wired for that story. We are wired as human beings for the same story, whether it's now or it's 5,000 years ago. Those same epic quests happen in every story. So story is food. During this pandemic, what has everybody been doing every night?
Binging
story.
Yes.
We've been binging story, right? Because we can't get out and we can't go places. We get food and we get story and we binge it all. And we look, and we're gonna look like Jabba the Hutt after we finish this thing.
Oh gosh, I hope not.
But story is absolutely food. It's food. It's soul food, right? So that's why I love telling story. I'm providing an essential service to everyone right now. Literally, I'm giving people, I want to bring food to starving people, right? And honestly, it's
we like
why
that food.
Yes, we like that food.
Well, I mean, it's honestly the success of shows like Signed, Sealed, and Delivered and When Calls the Heart, and these shows are food for starving people. They just are, because everybody else is serving them razor blades, right? Zombies and who eat you, vampires who split you open with their fangs, dead bodies, mafiosos that shoot you, riddle you with bullets, blow you up, right? Everybody is providing that. There's no shortage of that food anywhere, right? But the food that we're providing is like nobody's providing it anymore.
Yes.
And I really believe, I don't think we're geniuses. I don't think Michael and I, when we created When Calls the Heart, Michael Landon Jr., we weren't geniuses. We just had great timing, right? It's something that we knew we wanted to do. That's the kind of content that we've been making our whole careers. So, we just happened to come along at a time when nobody else was making this food anymore. Right? It's like collective amnesia in Hollywood. Nobody remembers how to do this. Yes. Honestly, I mean, sometimes when I go and pitch things, take new projects and pitch them and so forth, they look at me like somehow I'm magic, because it's like, how do you do these kinds of shows? It's like everybody's forgotten how.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Touched by an Angel ended in 2003.
Right.
That's 17 years ago. And since then, it's really, it's really turned into, everything dark and cynical and, taking us like lemmings over a cliff into hell. I mean, that's what it feels like a lot of the times. When you have to take a shower after you watch television, that's not a good thing. That is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me tell you too, when I discovered When Calls the Heart, my friend had she saw the pilot movie. She had caught it on Hallmark and whatever.
Right.
And I just had my baby. She's 5 now. She will be 5. And she told me during maternity leave, because I was like, oh, I don't have anything else to watch on TV or Netflix, blah, blah. She's like, you need to watch When Calls the Heart. And I'm like, okay. And so, which was perfect timing because I had an infant. My husband was working nights. I can't watch anything scary by myself. I'll have nightmares. I'll be up all night, and it's not something I lean towards. And so when I found When Calls the Heart, I binged the first 2 seasons on Netflix in like 2.5 days. But it's true. The stories that were told were so poignant and, very relatable, and it's a clean show, and I wasn't left scared out of my mind. I was hungering for more, for sure. And so I definitely appreciate that. And also with, I have 2 daughters, and they're very little, so they're not at, When Calls the Heart age yet. I don't think they'll get it.
Yep.
Wait a couple of years, but I can
Right.
go back, when they are old enough, and show them the series, and not have to worry about anything.
Right.
Like, with the Cullen Sullivan 1980s version of Anne of Green Gables, that's another one, or Little House on the
Right.
Prairie, Road to Avonlea.
Right.
Because they don't make it like they used to. So I, thank you,
Yep.
and we appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So let's talk about that food. Oh, please go ahead. Finish.
Sure. Well, no, I was just going to say that I don't know if you guys know the movie I Can Only Imagine, or
Yes.
the movie I Still Believe, which came out this year. Well, some really good friends of mine, made those movies. John and Andy Irwin are the directors. They're brothers. And John Irwin sent me a text last year, and the text was, "What have you done with my wife?" And
Dear.
I go, nothing. Whoa, nothing. And then he said, "I haven't seen her in 3 days."
Oh no.
Your stupid show. She's in there with your stupid show. And the kids are hungry. There's no food in the house. We can't get her out of there. It's like, enough already with When Calls the Heart.
Oh my goodness.
So,
oh my goodness. It sounds like my husband.
I would take credit for that, for that infraction. I'll be happy all day long that I keep women locked away in their rooms.
Yes.
Binging the show.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, my husband found me crying after one of the earlier, a lot of times through When Calls the Heart. But definitely that first season, he's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Shh, this is a good one."
Oh my goodness. So yes, let's talk about this amazing soul food that you have given us, that we have all fallen in love with.
Okay, let's do it. Well, we, when Michael and I were making the film, first started making the film When Calls the Heart, which turned into essentially the pilot movie, for the show. I don't know if you know the story, but the origin story. The origin story of When Calls the Heart are like their own kind of hero's quest. Because in 2008, when we were making the pilot movie up in Alberta, Canada, the economy fell apart.
Yes.
And so September of 2008, and literally the money for the movie melted down when the economy was melting down. And the world was like worried that it was going to slip into a Great Depression. And we had to shut down the movie in 2008 because of that. And it was, for us, it was a death for us. It was like, through no fault of our own, we were only halfway through making the movie. And in the world of film and TV, that's like a brain tumor. That's like getting a diagnosis of a brain tumor, because it just can't, there's nothing you can do with half a movie. It's worthless.
Right.
And we also were in a deep financial hole, because when you're shooting, when you're in production, you're working ahead of payroll. So we were about 10 days ahead of payroll, and the money was gone, and we had to come home, and our names were on that company up in Canada. So we had to come home with our tail between our legs. We sent everybody home. We didn't know how we were going to fix it. I thought my career was over after, I had been doing it now for, a good 20 years, at least 23 years. And I thought, okay, well, I'm done. I'm toast. We're never going to figure this out. And, we sort of figured, okay, well, we can't finish the movie. The movie is worthless. Here goes a great project, just kind of down the toilet. And it took us 3 years of real soul searching, and also, sense of failure, a sense of like, where do we go now? And I called all my men guys around me, my posse of, people that I count on for, support, encouragement. And they all said to me, don't make any rash decisions on this, take 30 days and try to get some perspective, because nothing about you has changed. Your skills are still the same. Your family and friends still care about you and love you. And the promises in scripture haven't changed. The promises of God take some time to get perspective. So I did that. And my pastor called me at that time, Rick Warren, who is the pastor of Saddleback Church, and he wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. He's been a very big influence on me. He said, I heard about what happened to you. What made you think it was going to be easy? And I said, well, Pastor, I was like, wow, that's harsh. It's like, well, Pastor, it's not about that. It's not about whether it's easy. It's always been hard. I just didn't think it was going to be this hard. And he said, well, hey, look, when we go over to, Africa and try to open up a health clinic over there, and the corrupt government steals us blind, or the tribal chieftains are warring and, burn it to the ground. He said, what's the difference between what you and Michael are trying to do and what we do over there? You are swimming upstream no matter what. The culture desperately needs what you're doing, but they're not asking for it, right? They don't know they need it until they see it. And so they need it. They're not asking for it. So you're gonna have to swim upstream no matter what. And he said, when the children of Israel were wandering around Egypt for 40 years, after the Exodus, they were wandering around looking for the promised land. He said they came to a brook that had given them water in the past, a well that had given them water in the past. And when they got there this next time, it had dried up. And he said, what did they do? Did they sit down and they whine about it? Did they talk about how defeated they were? Like, where's our water? We deserve water. It's not fair what happened to us. He said, no, they had to pick up and go find a new well. He said, so go find a new well. You clearly have to go find a new well, because that well is dried up. Well, three years later, we found that new well in the producer of Dumb and Dumber.
Oh my goodness.
Brad Cravoy, our partner in One Calls the Heart. He had made Dumb and Dumber, and he had made 100 movies, right? And
I had no idea he had done Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah,
that's my brother's favorite. Man, I gotta tell my brother now.
So we told our story to Brad. We showed him. We cut together the 11 days of footage we had filmed on the movie. And we told him our story, and he goes, man, why didn't you guys find me sooner? I eat these kind of projects for lunch. I love a salvage operation. I'm not afraid of this at all. So we took our 11 days of footage in, which was basically the middle of the movie. And we took it to the Hallmark Channel, and they loved it because they had made some other Jeanette Oak movies with Michael, the Love Comes Softly movies.
Right.
They loved it. They said, hey, can you finish this? Can you finish this? And, finish it out for a movie. And we said, absolutely. And Brad said, We're going to have to go to Romania to do it though, because it'll be cheaper over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, whatever you need, how high, we just saluted. And so we went to Romania. We shot for another 11 days. We finished the movie. Hallmark loved it. They tested it. The movie tested really good, the focus group testing. So they aired it, and it aired. It had like 3.2 million people watching it.
Wow.
And they loved that. And it was at that point that they said, we're thinking about getting into the series business. And would you guys want to make 6 episodes of this? And we saluted. We saluted again. It's like, we'll do whatever you guys want, whatever you want. And think about this for a second. Had the sky not fallen on us in 2008, and had we finished the movie, it would have been a nice little movie. It would have been a one and done movie. It took us going through the wilderness and having to look and come to a brook that was dried up and having to go look for another brook to get in the new brook. Guess what that was? A TV series. And now we're in production on season 8. After this season, we will have about 90 hours of When Calls the Heart, the TV series, in the book. Think about that. If you don't go through the wilderness, you can't get to the promised land. You have to go through the wilderness to get to the promised land. That's just a principle for all of us.
Yeah.
And this pandemic right now, it's horrible. I hate it. I hate being stuck in my house. I hate it. I hate that we don't have the freedom. I can't be up in Vancouver and participating and rooting my team up there, and John Tinker and all of our great folks up there and our actors. I hate not being able to go up there and root for them, right? But you know what? We have to be fearless when we're in these situations. Who knows what's going to happen in our culture? Who knows what's going to happen in the politics of our land? Who knows what's going to happen to this virus? We have to be fearless. It doesn't mean we're not cautious. You have to be cautious and be safe as a gift to other people. We need to be cautious, not just for ourselves, but to other people. But we have to be fearless. We have to say yes, and we have to be fearless, right? And so anyway, that's the origin story of When Calls the Heart. And we would not, had we finished the movie in 2008, we would have not ever seen the series. I'm convinced of that. 8 seasons, 8 seasons now, and who knows how many more. We would have
100.
We will keep doing it as long as everybody shows up. I would not be on your podcast. There would be no reason for your podcast. You guys would not be friends, maybe, right?
No,
probably not. I would not have met my best friend, because I met her on the When Calls the Heart fan page. So
see, the Hearties, the worldwide wave of Hearties, and the Hearties parties everywhere now in other countries. Hearties down under, and the Hearties of Germany and France and the UK and South America. I mean, honestly, we would have never seen any of that. There would be none of that.
Right.
So that's why this lesson is not just about, some TV producer who's telling his testimony, his story of like, oh, wow, check me out. Look at all the good things that have happened to me. I've been to hell and back on this. Right? I was in captivity. I was in captivity. I had to wander for years in the desert of our business trying to figure out what to do. Right? And we got to this promised land, and it doesn't mean it's been easy. It's always hard. Look at all the challenges that the show has had to go through. Some of our cast members leaving the show for different reasons, right? This year, the pandemic, has squashed production everywhere. There's only 2 shows in Vancouver being filmed right now. Ours is one of them.
Wow.
Right? Last year there were 100. So I'm not arrogant enough or so full of ego that I'm just saying, oh, well, whatever, bring it, bring it on. I will take on any problem. Sure, I'm scared. I'm scared every day, of things that could happen, but we don't walk in fear. You walk into the scared, you gotta just walk right into the fear and confront it, open your arms to it and let it make you a better person. So, this show has been challenged from every which way you can challenge it.
I call it the little show that could.
Yeah.
It truly is. It truly is. And again, it's not because we're geniuses. It's because this is really supposed to happen. This is God's show. I just put it all in his hands, and it can go for as long as he wants it to, and he can do with it as he will. And I'll just keep saying yes and follow the path. But, it's also a bigger story than me. The Hearties are the legacy. Your friendships as Hearties are much bigger deal than the show. Because that will outlive the show. The legacy of When Calls the Heart is you. That's the legacy of When Calls the Heart. All these friendships and this fellowship that has been catalyzed, by a TV show, right? When we were doing Touched by an Angel, we would hear, and Martha could tell you this too. We would get emails, we would get letters from viewers who would say things like, I was considering doing harm to myself. And your show came on and I decided to watch it.
Yeah.
And when I heard those angels say that God loves me and has a plan for my life, I decided to give another shot.
Yeah.
Wow.
We would hear from suicide hotlines that would say that their call volume of people asking for help would go up on Sunday nights after our show was over.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
I got chill bumps.
Oh my
wow.
Okay. So here's the thing. I got to be part of that show. And I can say our show saved lives.
Yeah.
I can say that, right?
Yes, you can.
There are not too many shows that can actually say that. And again, I don't say it to congratulate myself or to congratulate Martha. I say it because we were given story as food to give to people.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing this, right? It's why I do this. It's why I go through the challenges of doing this. We're trying to bring life-saving food to people, save their homes, save their families, save their marriages, give their kids some hope during these sometimes hopeless times. And that's what we're supposed to do. So with Touched by an Angel, it was a show that was saving lives. That was the legacy of Touched by an Angel. We could say that show saved lives. When Calls the Heart, our legacy is all of you. And you guys are ministering to each other. You are befriending each other. You're speaking into each other's lives. You're becoming champions for each other. That's better than the show. That's a way better, outcome than the show itself. Now, again, we will continue putting that food out there as long as they'll let us. As long as they'll let us, right? And we'll just keep growing this. We'll keep growing this movement of friendship, movement of friends who are coming together and making their lives richer and better, and in their own communities too. I'm sure lots of Hearties are doing good things in their communities, right? Not because our show caused that, but because we activated some sleeper cells, right? It's like, the content is like secret code words that activate the sleeper cells to go do great things, in the culture. And so anyway, again, I'm taking half your show to give one answer, but
it's okay.
But it's honestly that I say it with all humility and gratitude. And it's, again, it's not me. It's God. God said, go do this. Trust me. Trust me. Stick with it. Stick with it. Don't give up. When we were ready to give that movie up, don't give up. Stick with it, because I have a bigger and different plan than you could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
And for me, that's not about Hollywood producers talking, grandstanding for all the fans. That's me telling you need to do the same thing in your context, right? Hearties need to do exactly that same thing in their context, because we all go through captivity and exoduses and wandering through the desert sometimes. It's life. Life is hard. Life we live on a broken planet. There's 6 billion people, going on 7 billion people on the planet. Guess what? They all have free will. And you know what that means? Nothing can get accomplished because everybody is bumping into each other with their own agenda and with their own needs and their own desires and wants. How does anything ever get done with free will when everybody has free will? Well, it gets done because story drives them into groups. Story drives them into groups of people that can become armies and do good things in the world. So anyway, it's a lesson for everybody. It's not about TV producers. It's a human lesson about how to survive this life and thrive in this life.
Yeah.
Well, there's one question that we're all dying to know, and how did you discover When Calls the Heart in the first place? How did it even come across your path?
So, Michael, as we talked about earlier, had made this series of movies with the Hallmark Channel called Love Comes Softly.
Right, yes.
Yeah, and those were based on Jeanette Oak's books.
Yes.
Right, those are also Jeanette Oak books. So Michael had this great relationship. While I was doing Touched by an Angel, he was doing those movies.
Right.
So when I finished up with Touched by an Angel, we had been friends for a while, and we had always threatened to do work together. Like we always said, oh, it'd be cool if we could work together. And we shot Touched by an Angel in Utah. And so I was in Utah all the time.
Right.
Michael at the time lived in Utah. And so, we just had lots of time together. And when Touched by an Angel wrapped up after 9 seasons, I had been working probably for 11 or 12 straight years on TV shows. And back in those days, and still some network shows do this, but we would shoot 24 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which is, that's essentially 9 to 10 months of your year.
Yeah.
That's grueling.
And it's grueling. You're feeding that beast every 7 or 8 days with a new script. And so when you're doing 24, 10 is hard. 10 or 12 is hard. Double that. You double that for the big shows like that. So I was kind of burned out. I was ready for, to take a break, because they, when you work for somebody else, they rent your life from you. I'm not complaining. It's good work, and it's fulfilling, but they do rent your life from you, and you're on call 24/7 when this happens. Like doctors in that way. So I was ready for sort of a year of coasting a bit after 12 straight years doing it and being able to spend time with my family. So Michael and I said, hey, let's, the Love Comes Softly movies had been a success, and Fox was courting Michael to say, hey, let's do a series of other, projects together. And so Michael said, why don't we join forces? We created a company called Bleed Pictures. We just joined, he's a director and a writer. I'm a writer and producer. So it was good, a good match between us, and we're friends. So we got our hands on several of the Jeanette Oak franchises, beyond Love Comes Softly, the Canadian West series, which is this series. There's 5 books in the Canadian West series. We also have another series called Women of the West that we held on to the rights of, And so we began to work on, we did a Francine Rivers movie for Fox. We did a Beverly Lewis movie for Fox. We started to get some momentum going. And then we were approached with the idea, When Calls the Heart, the movie. And because we had the rights to the book series, we went for it. And that was probably 2007 when that happened. And then we got into production in 2008, and then it all blew up at that point. So it was really, because of the success of the Love Comes Softly movies that Michael had. I was not involved in any of those. I kind of came on after that. But then, I got to know Jeanette. Michael had a great relationship with Jeanette. We just felt like this was a perfect sort of way to sort of do a nice big chunk of content, was to take her next best-selling series and do that. And so that's kind of really how it all kind of came together. Way back in 2007 was where the fire was lit.
Wow.
To do this.
Yeah. Did you need to collaborate with Jeanette on the second part of the When Calls the Heart story with young Elizabeth? Because I know this book series is Win and Elizabeth, and then obviously, things happen.
Well, so the genesis of that is that Jeanette stuck with us through the wilderness experience.
Right.
Because we wanted to finish that movie.
Yes.
And the most rugged truth about the whole thing was that when we got the opportunity to finish the movie for Hallmark 4 years later, our leads, Maggie Grace and Stephen Amell, from 2008, they had become big stars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And they were sweet. They were so sweet to us when we approached them and said, "Hey, would you guys be able to help us finish the movie?" They said, "We would love to." And then their managers and agents said, "Guys, the reality is they're already committed 3 years out."
Yeah.
And so at that point we said, now it really is dead. Right? Because how do we finish this movie without our two leads?
Yeah.
And
right.
Because in those 11 days in 2008, we had shot the middle of the movie.
Right.
Right?
Oh.
Act 2 was pretty much done.
Oh
right?
my goodness.
But Act 1 and Act 3 were undone.
Oh
Right?
no.
And so so we thought, okay, well, we really can't finish because we can't get our actors back.
Right.
And Michael called me up and he said, I had this weird dream.
Oh dear. Oh my goodness.
About a journal.
Oh.
Wow.
You can tell we're real fans when we're going,
This is amazing.
And I said, you mean like a journal that has 11 days worth of footage from 2008 in it? And he said, yes.
That's so cool.
Just
Yeah.
reading
just
each
started
other's
to-
minds.
Yeah, we just started to spin on that for a bit. And we said, so maybe Elizabeth there's another branch of the family that Jeanette hasn't written about yet.
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Thatcher from 20 years ago has a niece who is a namesake niece, right? And it was her Aunt Elizabeth 20 years ago who had the adventure with Wynn Delaney in Act 2 of the movie. And she sort of was lost to the world, right? She was lost to the world. In the books, actually, Elizabeth and Wynn go off and become missionaries.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we sort of said, okay, well, maybe she was lost to the world. And now, she's so passionate about her teaching that she just left the family. She and Wynn went off and they're nowhere to be found now because we can't see them anymore. And young Elizabeth from 20 years later, whose parents are also wealthy, who live in Hamilton in the big city back east. She also has a passion to be a teacher, just like her Aunt Elizabeth did. But she finds the journal that
That's so cool. Yeah.
that her father has kept hidden from her because he didn't want her to leave. Her parents never wanted her to really know the true story about Elizabeth going off and leaving her family behind and going out and struggling in the prairie and all of that. So they kind of hid it from her. And then her younger sister happened to find it and give it to her, right? And then Elizabeth begins to read it, and she begins to imagine her Aunt Elizabeth's story. And now we get to use all those great scenes we already shot.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
And they become like her imagined flashbacks on that other story. And then we were spinning on that for a while. And we said, you know what, this could really work, maybe. And then we thought, no, this is so lame. They will never buy this. They'll say, what, that multi-generational thing. And I'll have to say, Hallmark said to us, well, we have some questions about this, but what you shot 4 years ago is beautiful. And we got big stars now in that. So let's try to figure this out. So we just went forward with that plan, and we essentially shot. That's why we had to go to Romania too, because it was cheaper to do. And we cast out of England. We cast Poppy Drayton and Daniel Sharman as those characters. And so and we shot in the presidential palace in Romania, in Bucharest, Romania. That's where Elizabeth Thatcher's family lived, right? In that big mansion. It was a presidential palace in Romania. So we put it all together, and we, in the back of our minds, we said, it works, but people are probably going to see through this and going to think, oh well, they probably had to salvage this thing, and they've had to slap it together, and that's in our heart of hearts we were thinking, well, we're doing our best, with the circumstances that we had. Well, Hallmark did their focus group testing of the movie, and the people loved it. They said, oh, this is brilliant, the multi-generational aspect of the storytelling, and it's like it was seamless to it. And do you know that movie got nominated for a Dove Award? And it also got nominated for a Movie Guide Award. That movie was nominated for awards, and here we thought it was just a salvage operation.
Word.
So this is I don't even know what the question was, but this is the casting and why.
How did you discover When Calls the Heart? And
storytelling with Jeanette Oak.
Storytelling with Jeanette Oak. Yeah.
Jeanette Oak. Yeah, that was the question. So Jeanette, God bless her. She could be our grandma. She really could. She's like, she loves us, and she's like a grandma to us. And she's stuck with us, even though we created this whole other branch that she never envisioned. But and she went with it, right?
Oh, my
and
goodness.
now, Coal Valley / Hope Valley. Well, it was Pine Springs in the original books, right? Well, we had to create a whole new town. We had to create new characters. Elizabeth, the niece, right? And Jack Thornton became her Mountie in escorting, her here. So taking care of her, we had to create a whole new kind of branch of the world.
Yeah.
But what's really cool is that Jeanette loved it so much, she went back to her publisher with her daughter Laurel and said, we would like to make new books about this new branch of the world.
Oh, so cool.
I remember reading that, and I thought it was amazing that she thought so much of the series that she would do that.
Right. So see, this is how God can take our mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
And take what we think is trash and turn it into treasure.
Yes.
Not because of us, but just us being open to being, following the lead and being used. And it's our trash for all of us in our lives can be turned into treasure if we just, allow God to work through us. And, not everybody knows this story. We've told it, at the Hearties reunions. I've told this story several times, and, people are sort of like stunned by it, but we don't tell this story to stun anybody. We tell them because it's like that Danny Goki song, "Tell Your Heart to Beat Again."
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Love that song. Yeah.
We had to tell our hearts to beat again,
Right.
because they really stopped, right? In 2008. We had to tell our hearts to beat again. And that's a lesson for all of us. That's a lesson for all human beings, for all Hearties, for sure. Tell your heart to beat again. You go through challenges. Life throws curveballs at us, and you have to find a way to get through them, by just going like this. You put your arms wide open and you just walk like a zombie straight into the fear, into the problems, into the challenges. Walk into them and let them bounce off you. Let it absorb them. Learn everything you can. Suck the marrow out of those problems and let them make you better. Because those things will, instead of becoming bitter, become better. Right?
Absolutely.
That's only one small letter difference. That's only one letter difference, and the letter is I. You add an I to that. You take the I out and make it an E. It becomes better, and that's an important lesson for all of us.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely.
Oh my word! I am so inspired by all of this.
Well, my grandfather was a preacher, so you get me started, and I guess it's probably what I could have done after When Carl's Heart crashed. But
all right, Hearties, there has been a lot that we have been fed. Wonderful soul food, and don't worry, he's coming back. You've heard the inception, and now next time we'll hear the rest. We're going to hear about the series itself. So everyone, be safe, be happy. We love you all, and take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Hearties Hotline. For more information about the Hearties Hotline, follow us on social media at Hearties Hotline on Twitter and Instagram. We drop an episode every Wednesday, so we'll see you next week.